Hi, and welcome to the I T'd Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 89. What can sand teach us about trust? So, sand. It's coarse, it's irritating, it gets everywhere. I hate it. No, sand is on beaches. Sand is everywhere. Sand touches everything. I don't know if you've ever had sand. My yard is like a sandy loam mix, and so I get sand literally everywhere. And once it gets in anything, it's there to stay. No matter how much you clean, no matter how much you process, sand will always show more. It's just not it's not great. And honestly, this is a lot like what trust is. And so when we talk about trust in IT or cybersecurity or in computers, what we're talking about is the trust or chain of trust that allows us to progress and allow things in and out of a network or a computer or a process or anything like that. So trust is really just the concept of allowance or permission to do something. And there is a concept that has been thrown around. It used to be a buzzword. Now it's just sort of this background noise bit called zero trust. And zero trust is this concept where you don't trust anything. Like you don't have anything that maintains trust. And the idea is every step of the way something is challenged, and you never just inadvertently allow something to happen inside of your network. And there's a lot of different ways that you can craft this. But first, I'm just going to take issue with zero trust. The whole fucking concept of zero trust. It's impossible to have zero trust. And let me tell you why. Because you eventually have to trust something. That's the whole problem, is that you have to trust something. You have to trust that your tools are working. You have to trust that the manufacturer or vendor or user or process or function or anything, you have to trust that it is supposed to be there. You're supposed to trust that the data is supposed to be there. And there's no way to get around that. You have to trust. Zero trust is a concept. It is ultimately what zero trust boils down to. And I'm going to demystify this for those of you who are really into this fucking buzzword. But zero trust is essentially just the concept of layered security or security in depth. That's really all it is. It's just a different way to say security in depth. Because the concept of security in depth is the idea that you have multiple functions or you have multiple checks and balances every step of the way. If one piece fails to do its job, if one piece fails to stop the attacker, you have multiple fallbacks to maintain security or consistency or whatever. And that the real concept of this is this is why we remediate on top of having an antivirus. This is why we have a firewall on top of a firewall on top of a firewall. This is why we have this. This is why we have a isolated network structure so that if an attacker gets into one device, they don't get into all devices, so on and so forth. This is that concept. And so zero trust you can't really ever achieve zero trust because at some point you have to trust something. And that is exactly the point with sand. When you get sand in anything, it takes a considerable amount of effort to clean it up, but also it never fucking goes away. You always have sand. There's sand everywhere. Sand. It just gets everywhere. And it's awful. I mean, awful if you don't like it. But there are other aspects to trust and sand that we can that we can use. So for instance, trust is an extremely useful thing because when we process it appropriately, we can have trust where that information can be identified and tracked appropriately. So for instance, when we have a trust platform or a security platform that can identify a user, where it's coming from, what they're doing, and really kind of track information that is a little off and process it appropriately, we can see the anomalous behavior within any sort of information that we're looking for. And so that trust that we have allows us to identify and come out with a really good and polished idea of something that's going on within the environment. Just like if you put some sand, some grit inside of an oyster for, long ass fucking time, you'll get a pearl eventually, maybe. And it depends on if you shuck it properly and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of work involved, just like with trust. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Anyway, the concept of trust is that, when we're processing data or as we allow users to do things, anything really, we have to basically trust they're allowed to be there. And there's a few different ways we do this. And so, originally it was with username and password. And so we would trust a user with that. And then we moved on to certificate-based trust with like Kerberos authentication. And so now we have a certificate that identifies the user and we get a token. And we can trust the token because the token has existed in one place persistently for a period of time that is not so far in the past that is suspect. Then we also have things like, we move to things like machine level cert trust or location based trust. And so, we identify where a user is coming from or what they are, what they're using to access data, or what they're using to process. And we can also use heuristic trust, which is this application is doing this particular thing or this process is doing this particular thing, and this is normally within its bounds. And so we have to trust all of this. The concept of zero trust breaks down because at some point you have to trust that something is telling you the truth. And, you have to trust the computer's telling you the truth. You have to trust that your threat feeds are identifying. And so the concept of zero trust really sort of breaks down in the long run. And I understand this is me being pedantic, and I'll probably end up doing an episode on how pedantic individuals can be in IT. But really, it's not possible to get to a zero trust relationship. It's like I said, it's more of a concept than it is an actual thing to achieve. So, it's kind of like my rant on 0 days. It's hard for me as a security professional to take you seriously when the buzzword that you're going to use for everything is zero trust, zero trust, zero trust. And if your product says that, if your product is claiming zero trust, you might want to take a look at it again, because it's not great when product claims that and then doesn't really follow through with it. I mean, there's a lot of products out there that claim zero trust, or this will get you zero trust. There's actually a zero trust product out there. And the whole concept is that, like I said, of zero trust is that you're not trusting anything. Every step of the way, there's a challenge. And if you buy zero trust as a product, who are you fucking trusting? Well, you're trusting the vendor who's selling it to you. That's it. You've now put your entire faith into this one vendor. And so No, as you progress in implementation and designing and improving your security posture, one of the things that you need to consider is how trust is implemented in your environment. Where are your trust boundaries? How do you decide who gets trusted with what? And so on and so forth. And one of the things that you want to be able to identify in sort of this long and roundabout way is you want to be able to identify where you are not challenging access appropriately, or where you're not challenging function appropriately or at all. And this can be a challenge. This can be really hard to see, because when you are processing, gobs and gobs and gobs of data, or you have dozens of different security features or security functions operating independently or separately, it can be really difficult for you to identify that as a security practitioner. So one of the ways that you can do this is by processing all of your trust in a way that, okay, so if this group does this, how does this look like? You can build out that. You can also identify it by function, or by computer, or by destination, or by organization. However you are establishing or auditing your trust platform, this is how you do it. Or this is one of the ways you can do it, by identifying those specific lanes and how they're being processed through your trust platform, and identifying, okay, if this person were to access this file, this is what's going to happen. They are going to go through this computer. They're going to get questioned. They're going to present their token via Kerberos to the file server. The file server is then going to authenticate them through the share. Once they're in through the share, they're going to be identified through NTFS permissions, and this NTFS permission is going to allow them to access it either yes or no because of this. That computer is then going to check in with the domain controller to make sure that everything's still valid. And once everything is good, then it'll just allow the file to come back. And what you'll see in that specific example, and I know I brushed a whole lot under the table, and that may have just flown over a lot of people's heads, but the concept there is that we challenged the user, but there was no validation that the server is supposed to be the one doing the check. Again, that's an assumption we kind of have to make, but also that's not zero trust. We're not going to get there because the server has to have that information, and the server has to do this process. And we kind of have to trust that the server is supposed to be doing this. So we can build that out. We can supplement this detection process, or this trust platform, and this specific instance, by adding a SIM there to feed the log data from and analyze the events to alert on any anomalous behavior, or something that is not quite normal, or just to track it so that we can go back and audit it later. So that's kind of how we get around the problem of zero trust not being an actual thing. And this is how we can build those layers in naturally. Now, again, like I said, that circumstance probably flew over a lot of people's heads. But let's say you are at a beach, and instead of the beach being open to everybody getting into the ocean, instead what it is there is a security guard there that basically checks you every time you try to enter the ocean. And you have to be like, yeah, I'm going to go into the ocean. I know how to swim. Yeah. And the security guard says, prove it. And so you have to prove that you know how to swim. That's kind of what the zero trust function is. Now, that would be really annoying and not really possible in a lot of ways, just because it's beach, they're open, and let's never try to cordon that off, because that would be fucking lame. but that is basically how that zero trust platform would allow you to, or prevent you from getting onto the beach or allow you onto the beach. Another way would be, another thing, it would be a security guard who sits there and makes sure you don't have any sand. You're not taking any sand. Sand is precious. The sand is holy. You can't take our sand. And so every time you leave the beach, they're supposed to allow you onto the beach, but you can't leave with the sand. So there's a security guard who sits there and beats you anytime you have sand, beats the sand off you, rather. Wait, phrasing. Anyway, the security guard is checking you for sand, and anytime you have sand on you, you have to brush it off, and then you're allowed to leave, but you're not allowed to leave until that point. That can also be an example of zero trust, where you have sand, and because it's everywhere, you're not really allowed to do the thing that you need to do. For instance, like a cell phone accessing a corporate network. You're not allowed in because you're not the device that is trusted. You don't have the specific certificate. You are not free of sand because you don't have the certificate that's necessary to get into the network. And that's kind of a basic concept of how we can attribute trust in this situation as well. So, to sum it all up, if you haven't been completely confused and completely lost at this point, or if you are, hopefully this will clear it up, or try. I'll try. With trust, you are making an assumption about the function, person, data, server, whatever. You're making an assumption about something in your process stream, and you are allowing that assumption to guide the security protocols and identity and access within. And again, it can be anything. It can be trust between two computers. It can be trust between a computer and a domain controller. It could be a trust between networks, organizations, person to person. It's all very much an aspect of it is everywhere. Trust is everywhere, and it's everything almost. Like, man, I would not want to eat anywhere near trust because it would just get in it, or get in whatever I'm eating, and that would just be gritty and awful. And man, now I'm not hungry anymore. Anyways, that's all I got time for today, guys. I hope you all have a great day.